This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Just prior to coming in, I stopped in the chapel here at Relevant Radio and was praying with the Blessed Sacrament in our chapel. In the middle of that, I got up. I saw my producer, Nick, walk into the back of the chapel, and I knew we were getting close to airtime. I'm thinking, what's going on? Comes out, shows me his cell phone, and we had word that Charlie Kirk, who's a conservative commentator, was shot. He was shot in the neck, and is a young guy, 31 years of age. He was on his American comeback tour, trying to do what every one of us ought to do in this country and engage in peaceful discourse. And he was standing there, holding a microphone, inviting questions, challenging students, sparking debate. And that bullet rings out. He was rushed to the hospital. 2 hours later, he was pronounced dead. That's not democracy. That's cold-blooded murder is what that is. And the thing is, how do we get to this point in our society that we cannot have peaceful discourse? We don't have the ability to freely speak, to disagree, to test ideas, right? To exchange thought in the public square. We become that partisan that if we don't get our way, we have to resort to violence. And this is a person who did not like the voice of Charlie Kirk and his message and tried to silence him with a bullet. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about what's behind this and what we're seeing in our culture, where we as a nation are heading, and how do we right the course. Ed Morrissey joins me. Ed, it's great to have you with me today. I'm looking forward to your perspective. What's happening? And if you have any other updates, please, I'd love to have you share them.
Drew, first up, it's really good to be on with you and on Relevant Radio. It's your show, but it feels like home to me. So it's very kind of you to invite me here. Now, I'm going to preface all of this by saying I did not know Charlie personally. I was a fan of Charlie. He was somebody who was unique within what we do because he was the one guy who was sort of the evangelist, if you will, for conservative values on college campuses. Yeah. Kind of like Ben Shapiro does. In fact, exactly like Ben Shapiro does. Charlie was willing to go out into the mission fields, to put it in sort of the biblical context, to make his case and to meet people where they were at and to testify to what he thought was the truth. And I agree with him on what he was testifying to, but clearly a great many people didn't. And he was okay with that. He wanted to meet those people. He wanted to engage them. He wanted to see if he could draw them into actually coming up with a coherent rebuttal to whatever it was that he was saying. And often it led to some really great exchanges. And sometimes it led to nastier exchanges, but it never got violent. And he never was a violent person. This is a person who wanted to talk. He was a man of words, right? He was a man of thoughts. He was a man of ideas. And it's just astounding to me that I have to talk about him in the past tense.
Yeah.
31 years of age. He had a wife and 2 young kids. I mean, I think they're both toddlers. This was a young man with a huge, bright future ahead of him, and somebody decided to end it just because they didn't like what he was saying. And we're getting a lot more of that these days. There's a lot of violence that's being directed in politics. We have gotten to a point in this country where we can't have those conversations. Yeah. And that's not the America that I know. It's not the America I want. Now, I don't want to say you can't have it. Most of the time we can have them. It's certainly part of what you would call a normal exchange in a healthy democratic republic, right? Constitutional republic like what we have. We have these debates and arguments, if you will, so that we can get an idea of what it is that we want to do as a country, have elections, elect representatives who will represent our point of view, and then legislate based on what our values are and what our preferred policies are, and then execute those policies. That's why we have elections. We have elections so we don't need bullets. And we keep forgetting this, right? We have elections so that we don't have to tell the other person to shut up. We have elections so that everybody can talk, and then we can at least have some decision points as to where we're going forward. It's astounding to me, and I think it has been growing for decades, that we have become so brittle as a country, as a people, that we cannot tolerate people who have a different point of view from ourselves. And that when those points of view are expressed, the response becomes violent because the people who are opposed to them don't have the tools to articulate their alternate vision in a way that's compelling, that will compel others to follow them necessarily. And I think that's really what it is that Charlie was difficult to rebut. He was difficult to beat in an argument. And so rather than beating him in an argument, somebody decided to silence him instead. It's just incredibly sad.
It's such a good point, and I couldn't agree with you more, because I think that's the heart of this issue here. We've lost the art of civil discourse in this country. I mean, we've traded reasoned arguments for rage. We traded listening for shouting. Nobody listens to the other side. Nobody does that. And now we're watching, the fruit of this poison when someone's words are seen as intolerable and they have to have their life ended. To your bigger point, this is not America. This is not who we are supposed to be. I mean, we should be able to exchange these different ideas and debate them honestly. But I think you're also right about him. I mean, his approach and the things that he said were often hard to debate, especially in this culture, depending where, what side of the aisle or what your position is. How do we get to this point? Why do you think America has lost this ability to have civil discourse? And what drove us to this point, and how do we get back?
Here, generally speaking, is my thought on this, is that we stopped educating people decades ago, and we started indoctrinating them into particular ideologies, which leaves them unprepared to, A, defend the ideology, even if they authentically embrace that ideology, right? In that indoctrination process, other points of view have been excluded from that, so that people who go through school, and I'd say this is especially true of higher education, but I think it's also true in high school and that sort of thing, is that the political and ideological environments of these institutions are so one-sided and insular that the young men and women who process through them never really have to be exposed to alternate points of view and never have to articulate a defense of their own points of view when presented with an articulate rebuttal of somebody else's point of view. They're simply not prepared for that. And so in a way, that leaves them as children. And the childish response is to lash out when contradicted. And I see so much of this in evidence in the way politics is generally conducted, especially these days. And that's the reason why Charlie Kirk was focusing on college campuses, right? Is because many college campuses exclude points of view that contradict their particular progressive ideology. And Charlie Kirk wanted to bring that into the mix so that the young men and women who were attending college campuses could at least hear the argument and ask questions. And that's exactly what they're not getting. And again, I think that we have formed at least a couple of generations of Americans to be incapable of dealing with that. Now, I think 98% of them learn it after they get out of college, after they get out of this sort of this cosseted bubble and realize they're in the real world and other people have other points of view. But I think that there's some who just never are given the tools to deal with that. And colleges used to be about, universities was about the universe, being exposed to everything, learning how to think. That's what the point of a classical education was, going through, all of the different great thinkers and understanding how to process, not just, what it is you're supposed to believe, but what it is that you're supposed to think, how it is that you're supposed to think. And I think that we have really failed at that over the last 40 or 50 years. And I think social media contributes to it too. And there's lots of great things about social media, but there's a lot of bad things about social media too. Yeah. And part of it is that it allows people who are antisocial to combine up, right? Or to have their delusions validated. And by doing so, fall deeper into delusions. Yeah. And so there's all these things that are going on. And we are not treating it. We're not dealing with the root causes here. If we're not going to talk about truth, there's not much reason to talk, right? This is what Relevant Radio is about. Relevant Radio is about bringing the truth of the gospel. And I love Relevant Radio because it talks about the truth of the gospel. When we're talking about politics, truth can be, a matter of opinion or approach, but it's the talking that matters. And we can talk these things through, and even if we disagree, even if we walk away and say, you're full of beans, you don't know what you're talking about, at least you've heard the person out. Yeah. Sometimes just meeting people is enough. Yeah. You get their humanity and realize that, they have the dignity that Christ gives them, and that we can, even if we disagree with them, even if we can't necessarily get along with them, we understand why God loves them, and we should love them as well.
Well, Ed, I'm grateful for you too. Grateful for the platform here at Relevant Radio and for being able to share this moment with you and bring some perspective to it. People want to follow you. You're on X as well. What's the best way to do that?
Well, my account is just my name. So it's Ed Morrissey, at Ed Morrissey, and EDMORRISSEY, 2 R's, 2 S's. That's the best way to follow me.
Well, Ed, thanks. I know that we'll be hearing you again. You're going to be back with me in the days ahead and, of course, guest hosting, and we're grateful to have you here. That's Ed Morrissey.
Hey, like what you just heard? Then share it with your family and friends. And thanks for listening.